Hey everyone, it's time for another 3 at 3 on Solar PV. I'm Jen Runyon, Chief Editor of Renewable Energy World.
I'm Paula Mintz, Chief Market Research Analyst, SPV Market Research.
Hey Paula.
Hey Jen.
All right, we got 3 topics to talk about today. We're going to look at federal level attacks on renewables. Then we're going to pivot and talk about some good news out of Hawaii, potential good news, but then we're going to go back to consumer protection and look at some of the things that are happening in energy where, especially clean energy, where consumers could be, need to be protected.
Yeah.
Let's just say. So let's start on federal attacks. I mean, in the U.S., and we've already talked about it on 3. I think we've got the NOPR.
Yeah.
Rick Perry's directive to FERC to look at how we can use the market to essentially prop up coal and nuclear power in the name of resiliency.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, I think, and we both discussed with Puerto Rico, they're not going to be able to have what good would a 90-day supply of coal? There's nowhere, they aren't going to have that anyway. What good would it do them if the grid is destroyed?
Right.
Your 90-day supply isn't much use.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, comments were due on Monday. Much of the energy industry has weighed in on this. I was delighted to get to see Cheryl LaFleur, the FERC commissioner, speak last Friday, giving some perspective on how FERC is going to get through all those comments. Her little bit of skepticism was, in general, when FERC is evaluating rules, they want to see, like, first of all, what is the problem?
Yeah.
And what are we trying to solve? Yeah,
exactly.
Right. So she said, I'm a little skeptical when we're talking about a resource first and not a problem. So we'll see. Again, she's one of 5, so she doesn't have the final say.
And that's the good point here is there's actually not this sort of a problem. I mean, the part of the justification for the DOE/Perry's Act proposed rulemaking is the 2014 polar vortex, and I actually did some study on that. Yes, power was lost, but not for 90 days. So what are you talking about? And that seems like a slim to ridiculous justification. And then the hurricanes were used. That's an even slimmer and more ridiculous justification. Yeah. So what problem are you trying to solve? Yeah. You have to pick a problem. There has to actually be proof that this is...
There has to be a problem. With data. And she was very clear to say that too. We need to show us some data that there's a problem.
I think that, to me, in any case, that the problem that has been tried to solve on the federal administration level is that they're trying to prop up coal, which is improbable.
Yeah, which was a Trump campaign promise.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about Australia now? See, I missed this, but there's something going on in Australia which is kind of similar. Tell me about it.
Well, they've come up with a national let me put on my glasses briefly. National Energy Guarantee.
Okay.
Very vague, very few details. It'll be in the upcoming solar flare out next week.
Okay.
So very, very few details on this, and it really is trying to balance emissions control with doing exactly what the DOE is suggesting, having a supply of fossil fuel-based electricity generating resource, for a set period of time. So essentially, it's meant to look at coal. Coal is in abundance in Australia, and the energy minister has come out in favor of, the non-existent clean coal. Really, it is non-existent. I know that we'll maybe get some comments on that, but it doesn't exist, and it's very expensive in the future when it does. So anyway, it's really along the same lines. Now, after this was announced, the renewable energy industry in Australia, which truly has been starting to do things that's ramping the market, particularly for large scale, although I would like to see them focus again on DG.
Okay. Right.
And anyway, immediately people were like, whoa, what's happening? So a well-known organization that I won't name came out and wrote that this was an innovative idea and would be a template for other countries. This despite the fact there are so few details in this plan that even though you can clearly see it's going to impact renewables, there are very few details. Meanwhile, a couple of days later, Deutsche Bank, who I will name, came out and essentially said, no, very bad, future projects, no value. And now sort of the floodgates are open and things are really, people are starting to take a look at this.
Wait, back. So Deutsche Bank said future wind and solar projects will not have any value.
Right, for one particular industry, tilt renewables, no value.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not
good. Because of this.
Right.
So, as I wrote in the Solar Flare, which comes out again next week, if you have two competing entities, one essentially a pundit / analyst, and one the money, follow the money. Mm-hmm. They're being very risk adverse. Look at where the money is going.
Yeah.
That's pretty good advice no matter what.
Yeah, it sure is. We gotta move on. We gotta move on and talk about. Okay. I know there's so much to say because there are these federal attacks and it is really scary. But
it is really scary. It's a trend.
So let's look at Hawaii because Hawaii had some interesting a new rule that came out. I don't know if it's a rulemaking or a new program that the utilities.
It's the Hawaii PUC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the Hawaii PUC is now going to award, you describe it because I think you're a little more up on it.
It is a small program, and it also will be covered in the Solar Flare. So it is a very small program, but on the innovative self-consumption side, and this is even though I know Tesla has pulled back on orders to its installer base of its Powerwall, which Hawaii really, the market there and the installers really are relying on that. So we've discussed it. Anyway, so essentially, if storage system, residential customer, then you can be rewarded at a less than retail rate during the day for what you feed into the grid, but your battery your solar is charging the battery during the day. You use that electricity at night. So you're essentially self-consuming.
Nice.
And in the U.S., these are, few and far between. And honestly, should be a direction we're moving towards. Right. A little more independent, et cetera. On the other side, systems that do not have batteries, that are feeding into the grid, where the kilowatt goes to everybody, feeding, they're getting rewarded at, again, less than retail rates. So this isn't going to be exactly making people leap up and down. It might cut your bill. It's certainly not going to eliminate it. And they then would have to install equipment so the utility can control the system when they believe they need to.
Right.
On the upside, Hawaii is trying to find a way for their grid to be maintained and also to include more renewables. On the downside, as I believe we're going to discuss, do you really want the utility shutting your system down?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, so this is what we talked about before. I did my letter from the editor on if we could talk to the batteries. Utilities are trying to figure out how they can use these batteries to stabilize their grid, but there's some pushback. We had a reader comment, really insightful comment, saying, "Hey, I don't want you touching my inverter. Please keep your hands off of it." And I think this is something that maybe people should also pay attention to, is that, how are we going to protect these consumers who are going to let the utility come in?
Exactly. I mean, the fact is that people will, so in California, PG&E every summer sends out to everyone with an air conditioning saying, we'll give you this much of a break on your bill if you let us control your air conditioning. And I set mine high. My air conditioning is set on 80 because I'm trying to conserve.
Okay, good for you.
Because good for me. At the same time, we had days of 108 here, and I ain't gonna
dang.
So 80 is fine. I think that's doing my bit, but I do not want the utility that I'm not entirely comfortable with coming in and saying, "Okay, we're going to shut your air conditioner off now. We're going to raise it to 82 now." I get that we all need to pitch in, and I get that people will often not be their best selves, but that includes the utilities. So right back to that point, we all should be doing something to make sure the grid is maintained, that everybody is healthy, etc. And granted, some people will take advantage, but that includes the utilities and what regulation is on them. And what if they don't? Regulations aside. So it's a really big question. I don't want, it's the sort of that big brother question. And the United States does have a cultural identity of being very independent as actors.
We do. So we definitely don't want people bothering us.
And we do not.
And and that makes sense. And so I think this is an interesting place to watch. And of course we will be watching it because this is where the energy industry is going and the distributed side. I mean, so do you let people come in and play with your equipment? Is it your equipment? What if the utility installs it and then it's their equipment? Maybe that's a different story.
And that actually, you can either use a third party, but the utility still has to be able to operate it, or you can use the utilities equipment. Now, I think this is a very small program, really important to watch what happens on the storage side.
Yeah.
On the PV alone side, I don't think they're offering a robust enough incentive to get people to go, wow, yeah, less than half of what I'm paying per kilowatt hour. That sounds like a good deal to me. Right. I don't think they're offering enough. Right. I think if they really want to make that work, they have to offer a higher incentive per kilowatt hour and then maybe take it down and let it end up where it is. So if you're offering half or less than half, half, let's say half, maybe slightly more than half, whatever, half what people are paying per kilowatt hour, it's just not a great incentive. Yeah. So I wish they would offer more because I would like to really watch this and see what happens, how those two competing ideals of independence and I want to, maintaining the grid and letting someone have control over your system.
Yeah. Well, we will watch it. We'll watch it regardless.
Yes, we will.
We're out of time right now, but thank you so much for watching. It's always great to see you, Paula.
Thank you. You too.
We'll talk to everybody next time on 3 at 3 on Solar PV.
Bye.